It was supposed to be the pride of American engineering, sleek, powerful, revolutionary. Yet for hundreds of young men, it became a death sentence. The F4U Corsair, built to dominate the skies of the Pacific, ended up claiming more lives in training than in combat. Before it ever met the enemy, it was already feared by those meant to fly it. Military archives would later describe it as one of the most dangerous aircraft ever cleared for service. How could a weapon designed to ensure superiority turn into a machine that devoured its own pilots? Behind every fatal crash was not sabotage nor poor training, but the unforgiving mathematics of innovation. The Corsair's designers pushed the limits of speed, power, and lift, beyond what the era's pilots or technology could fully control. It was a marvel on paper and a hazard in the sky. From the decks of carriers to the runways of island bases, wreckage became the Corsair's signature. For the US Navy, the question was no longer how to win air superiority, but how to keep their aviators alive long enough to use it. Between 1940 and 1943, reports of fatal malfunctions multiplied: spontaneous stalls, broken landing gear, shattered canopies. The pattern was undeniable, yet production accelerated. Commanders called it acceptable loss, a phrase that hid the real story of flawed design and relentless wartime pressure. Inside squadron logs, the Corsair earned a nickname whispered in anger and grief: the Ensign Eliminator. It was more than a fighter, it was a test of how much risk a nation would tolerate in the name of progress. Every statistic told the same truth: the Corsair killed its own faster than the enemy could. And yet, the Navy refused to abandon it. Why? Because behind the chaos was potential, a speed unmatched, a power never before seen in carrier aviation. The question that haunted engineers and pilots alike was not whether the Corsair could fight, but whether anyone could survive mastering it. In 1938, the US Navy issued a demand that would redefine aviation: a single-engine carrier fighter capable of exceeding 400 miles per hour. Vaught's engineers responded with the F4U prototype, a radical combination of brute power and aerodynamic experimentation. At its heart lay the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, the most powerful radial engine ever mounted on a single-seat aircraft at that time. To harness that energy, they installed a massive 13-foot propeller so large that the aircraft's entire frame had to bend to accommodate it. The result was the Corsair's most distinctive feature, the inverted gull wing. It reduced drag, shortened landing gear, and provided clearance for that enormous propeller. But as one engineer later admitted, we solved one problem by creating 5 more. The new design changed everything about how the aircraft behaved. Its center of gravity shifted rearward, forcing the cockpit farther back to make space for a larger fuel tank. That single decision transformed visibility into a lethal flaw. Pilots couldn't see forward during carrier landings. Many described it as flying blind into the ocean. The Corsair demanded precision, but offered none. Add to that the unpredictable stall caused by engine torque, one wing dropping before the other, and disaster became routine. Veteran instructors refused to train recruits on it. In simulator briefings, they called it a machine that punishes hesitation. The statistics would soon confirm it. Between 1940 and 1943, over 100 Corsairs were destroyed before their squadrons ever left US soil. The aircraft's physical complexity compounded its danger. Its landing gear, shortened for deck clearance, was fragile under repeated impact. Oil leaks clouded windscreens, arresting hooks failed, and tailwheel bounce made every carrier landing a gamble. The Navy's Flight Safety Division began issuing emergency memos, each one urging redesign, each one ignored under wartime pressure. Production quotas mattered more than pilot survival. The front lines are waiting, one memo read, and the engineers must catch up later. When they did, it was already too late for hundreds of airmen. By 1943, the Corsair's reputation was beyond repair among carrier crews. It became the symbol of what wartime innovation often hides: that progress measured in speed comes paid in blood. Yet, instead of scrapping it, the Navy doubled down. They sent it to the Marines, land-based, less restricted, desperate for firepower. There, away from carrier decks and bureaucratic oversight, the Corsair would face a new trial. Could this killer of pilots redeem itself when unleashed against the enemy? Combat was supposed to prove the Corsair's worth. Instead, its debut nearly buried its future. In early 1943, a formation of newly deployed F4Us joined a mixed group of P-38 Lightnings and B-24 bombers in a mission over the South Pacific. The outcome became infamous as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 40 Japanese fighters intercepted them, 12 Corsairs entered the battle. Only 10 returned. The Corsair's first official air-to-air kill was recorded that day, but the circumstances exposed everything wrong with the design. Lieutenant Gordon Lyon Jr. scored that kill by accident. His Corsair collided mid-air with a Japanese Zero. Both aircraft were destroyed instantly. The Corsair's long-awaited triumph had come at the cost of its own pilot's life. The Navy responded by grounding entire squadrons and launching a full technical audit. Investigators identified recurring faults: asymmetric wing stall, landing gear oscillation, and control surface flutter at high speeds. The fix began modestly, with a small metal strip added to the leading edge of the right wing, synchronizing stall behavior. Other changes followed: reinforced tail hooks, sealed cowling flaps, and a new clear bubble canopy replacing the narrow birdcage frame. Incremental improvements turned the Corsair from a liability into a contender, but the Navy still considered it too volatile for carrier duty. It was quietly transferred to the U.S. Marine Corps, where necessity, not preference, would give it a second chance. Operating from land bases, Marine pilots had room to learn what the Corsair could actually do. Away from pitching carrier decks, its strengths emerged. It could outclimb, outdive, and outgun almost any Japanese aircraft. Against the A6M0, its raw power reversed the balance of the Pacific Air War. Veterans described the transformation as immediate. The plane that killed us now killed them. The Corsair's thick armor and immense speed made it the first Allied fighter that could attack, break off, and return unscathed. In less than a year, its kill ratio soared to 11.1. What had begun as a disaster evolved into dominance. Yet its dark reputation never disappeared. At the Brewster Aeronautical Corporation, one of 3 manufacturers licensed to build the Corsair, production shortcuts created a new wave of failures. Wings sheared mid-flight, screws detached during takeoff. Investigations uncovered disorganization, poor quality control, and even hints of deliberate sabotage. Brewster-built Corsairs were deemed unsafe for combat and restricted to training units. Engineers privately called them flying coffins with serial numbers. For a weapon meant to project American precision, it was a public embarrassment that underscored how fragile wartime industry had become under pressure to deliver. By 1945, the Corsair had outlived its stigma. Marines flying over Okinawa and Iwo Jima called it the Angel of Okinawa, a machine capable of carrying nearly 4,000 pounds of ordnance, rivaling some medium bombers. It strafed, bombed, and supported ground troops with brutal efficiency. Pilots who once cursed its name now depended on it to survive. The same aircraft that once symbolized over-engineering had become the cornerstone of Allied air superiority in the Pacific. The transformation was complete, but the story was not. The Corsair's deadliest legacy was still to come. In wars, it was never designed to fight. When World War II ended, most piston engine fighters were sent to museums or scrapyards. The Corsair was not. Instead, it kept flying through Korea, Indochina, and even Central America, long after jets had made its kind obsolete. Its longevity wasn't the product of nostalgia, it was necessity. In Korea, the mountainous terrain and close quarters combat nullified the advantages of early jets. The Corsair, with its low-speed stability and endurance, returned as a frontline asset for ground support. It could dive low, hit precisely, and climb back into the clouds before enemy fire caught up. For the men on the ground, that sound, the distinct whine of the bent-winged bird, meant survival. For engineers, it was proof that raw power, when mastered, could outlast technology itself. But even in its twilight years, the Corsair's contradictions persisted. On September 10, 1952, Marine Captain Jesse Fulmer faced Soviet-made MiG-15 jets, aircraft faster by more than 200 miles per hour. Against logic, he fought back. At low altitude, the MiG lost its advantage and the Corsair's heavy cannons tore through its fuselage. It was an impossible victory, a World War II relic destroying a jet in direct combat. Minutes later, Fulmer's own Corsair was shot down. He survived. The event made headlines, not as triumph, but as a reminder that courage often compensates for the limits of machines. The Navy called it a statistical anomaly. To historians, it became the last stand of the propeller age. 17 years later, the Corsair appeared again, this time not under a superpower's flag, but in the hands of 2 small nations at war. In 1969, Honduras and El Salvador fought a brief, brutal conflict known as the Football War. Both sides fielded outdated aircraft: P-51 Mustangs, B-26 bombers, and aging Corsairs. For 4 days, skies once dominated by jet fighters became a living time capsule of 1944. In one dogfight, Honduran captain Fernando Soto shot down a Salvadorian Mustang, then, astonishingly, two Corsairs flown by the opposing side. It was the last recorded combat between propeller-driven fighters. The era ended where it began. Machine against machine, pilot against fate. The Corsair's legacy is not measured in victories, but in contradictions. It was both predator and executioner, hero and hazard, a symbol of how innovation in war always comes tethered to tragedy. Between 1940 and 1953, more than 690 Corsairs were lost in accidents alone, yet the aircraft remains revered for its strength and endurance. The Navy never forgot the lessons it taught. That ambition, without restraint, can be fatal, and that mastery often demands sacrifice. Today, the F4U Corsair stands in museums across the world, not as a relic of glory, but as evidence of how progress in war is built on the wreckage of its own mistakes.